And we're back in the car like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for taking this drive home with me on this Tuesday night in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Well, sometimes it just turns out that a legendary film with legendary glittering names, it's a movie anniversary, and I have no idea that it was a movie anniversary, and gotta talk. What we gotta talk about? We gotta talk about it. So 70 years ago today, on August 5th, 1955, saw the final film of an iconic, legendary movie star who was still in her 20s, and this is the last movie that she would ever make. And her co-star, I would say, is the greatest star that Hollywood ever had. And the filmmaker, you could make a case, is the greatest filmmaker who ever lived. He's certainly in the conversation. On August 5th, 1955, Sir Alfred Hitchcock's To Catch a Thief opened in theaters. And for such a expensive looking film, even now looking at it, you say, man, this must have cost a lot of money to stage it and get everything together. It only cost $2.5 million to make this film, and it made just about $9 million at the box office. So you look at the numbers, it grossed about 3.5 times its production cost. It was a significant hit, and if you go on Rotten Tomatoes, the film sits at 93%, which is a significant score. But the reality is, it's not up to the quality of Hitchcock's other great films from this era. It's not Rear Window. Rear Window was Sir Alfred's previous film. I don't know about previous film. It was the previous year. He also did The Trouble with Harry in '55. It's kind of a black comedy. But To Catch a Thief, more so than any other Alfred Hitchcock film. This is a concept that I brought up in the Tequila Sunrise. This is a concept I brought up in the Tequila Sunrise episode, where I talked about that film, which is also a romantic thriller. It's nothing like To Catch a Thief, although, actually, To Catch a Thief is about Cary Grant's John Roby, who was a jewel thief, and a notorious jewel thief at that, someone who has had multiple trips to the federal pen, and now he's living overseas in Monte Carlo, trying to reform himself, maybe he's just waiting for the right time, because his nickname is the Cat, because he's a cat burglar. Maybe he's just waiting for the right time to spring back into action. We don't really know. But in Tequila Sunrise, Mel Gibson's Dale McCusick was world drug dealer #1, and now he wants to go straight. And in the world of that film, you have Mel, very young and looking very Abercrombie and Fitch model-ish. You have his buddy in the world of the film, Kurt Russell, arguably looking even more male model-ish. And you have a sensational Michelle Pfeiffer looking amazing. And I talked about how that film, you don't want to get hung up on all the particulars of plot. It's a film about 3 movie stars. Well, even more so than Tequila Sunrise, To Catch a Thief is a film about 2 movie stars. In this case, the extraordinary Cary Grant and the also spectacular Grace Kelly. Now, I need to point out, because I forgot to mention this in the Tequila Sunrise episode, that's not my phrase. It's a film about 2 movie stars is not mine. I'd love to take credit for it, but it's not me. And I'll tell you exactly where I got it from. There are a number of books. When people ask me, give me some books about the movie business, or even more particular about the Hollywood machine, how it works, how it doesn't work in certain areas. The 2 books that I will always mention, William Goldman's Which Lie Did I Tell? And also William Goldman's Adventures in the Screen Trade. So there'll be 3 books. But Adventures in the Screen Trade is when William Goldman famously said, nobody knows anything. That's how Hollywood works and doesn't work. It's because nobody knows anything. And Which Lie Did I Tell is another story of further adventures in the screen trade of the extraordinary writer, Oscar winner, William Goldman. The other book which is a little bit less well known, is called Monster. And the book is by, he's unfortunately passed, John Gregory Dunn, and his wife was Joan Didion Dunn, related to also the late Dominic Dunn, and the fantastic actor-filmmaker from American Werewolf in London, Griffin Dunn. So in Monster, John Gregory Dunn tells a story of his attempt to do an adaptation of the life of a somewhat controversial female television reporter named Jessica Savage. S-A-V-I-T-C-H, not Savage, Savage. And this took years of John Gregory Dunn busting his ass trying to get a Jessica Savage movie because he had all kinds of different producers and people involved, and he made a ton of money, but he just kept going through one draft after another, after another, after another. And at a certain point in time, Michelle Pfeiffer came on board to play Jessica Savage, and then a little bit later, Robert Redford came on board to play the love interest. The real Jessica Savage, well, let's say that in her romantic life, she was more likely to partner up with a woman than a man. No problem. When Redford came on board, there were a lot of questions. Well, what are we going to do now? And Scott Rudin, great producer, he said, we're no longer making a Jessica Savage movie. We're going to give Michelle's character, we're going to call her something else. And this is not going to be in any way a biopic about Jessica Savage. We're just going to make a movie, and Michelle Pfeiffer's going to play a character not even really loosely inspired by it. It has nothing to do with Jessica Savage. We've got Redford. Now we know we have a love story. We'll get a great soundtrack, and we're going to make a lot of money. John Gregory Dunn says in his book, he said, well, I'm like, well, Scott, I thought that this movie was supposed to be an expose, the hard-hitting, we're making a movie about Jessica Savage. Scott Rudin says, Greg, this is a film about two movie stars. It's a film about two movie stars. This is a movie not about telejournalism, not about Jessica Savage, who was a groundbreaker in her own right, a pioneer in her own way. This is a film about Michelle Pfeiffer, again, Tequila Sunrise 7 years earlier. This is a film about Michelle Pfeiffer and Robert Redford making goo-goo eyes at each other. They just happen to be working in the TV news business. This is a film about two movie stars. Don't worry about anything else. That's all you need to know. To Catch a Thief, 41 years before Up Close and Personal with Michelle Pfeiffer and Robert Redford, and 34 years before Tequila Sunrise. Alfred Hitchcock, who was not necessarily known as an actor's director, remember he famously was asked, do you think of actors as cattle? No, I just think they should be treated like cattle. He was not above bullying, and he didn't really bully either Grace Kelly or Cary Grant, but he was known for being, he's a funny guy, little guy, he's chubby, and he makes a lot of jokes, but he was not necessarily the easiest guy. He was very demanding. He wasn't Kubrick level, but Hitchcock knew what he wanted, and he also knew what he didn't want. But To Catch a Thief, as much as Tequila Sunrise, as much as Up Close and Personal, you can get hung up on the mechanics of plot of John Roby, and it seems like he's back in action. And then there's the Gabrielle Aubrey character. I believe the only member of this cast who is still alive. I think her name is Gabrielle Aubrey. The actress, she's 100 years old. She plays a character called Dominique in the world of this film. Unless I've got that backwards, and the character is Gabrielle and her real name is Dominique. But that actress is now 100 years old, a French actress who was in this movie. But this is a film about two movie stars, and two of the greatest stars to ever work in the medium. And when I mentioned how this is the last film that Grace Kelly ever made, if you don't know this, while she was on location in Monaco or Monte Carlo, she met Prince Rainier. They fell in love, and she didn't leave Hollywood. She simply didn't go back, would be more accurate. She stayed right where she was, and she didn't seriously entertain the idea of ever coming back. There was some talk when Alfred Hitchcock was preparing Marnie. He courted her. He flew to Monaco. He was desperate to get Grace Kelly to make a comeback. She just didn't want to do it. I guess she didn't love the work. She didn't love the grind of filmmaking, and she was happy. I always believed that Grace Kelly did not regret her decision to leave the movie business when she did. And, you know, she died tragically. She had a stroke while she was in a car with her niece, and, you know, fortunately the niece was okay. And I remember that was a big story. I think I was in 3rd grade at the time, and that was just crazy stuff, that she drove a car off a cliff. It was just awful, and it was very fortunate that the young girl was okay. But To Catch a Thief ostensibly is about a jewel thief who does not want to be a jewel thief anymore, but because he seems to be getting cornered, he has to take actions which he tells certain people that he's doing certain things for cover. And basically, Grace Kelly plays an heiress, and her mom is played in the movie by Jessie Royce Landis. And I mentioned this in the Tequila Sunrise episode, but if you missed it, Jessie Royce Landis in this film is age appropriate for Cary Grant, but he clearly has eyes for Grace Kelly's character of Frances. Stevens is the last name. Has eyes for the daughter. And then 4 years later, Jessie Royce Landis plays Cary Grant's mother in North by Northwest, also directed by Sir Alfred Hitchcock. So you can make whatever jokes you want, a character being a love interest and then a mom. Hey, they did it in Hollywood in the 80s and 90s. Sally Field and Tom Hanks play theoretical romantic partners in the 1988 film Punchline. And then 6 years later in Forrest Gump, Sally Field plays Tom Hanks's mom. Now, they're not necessarily in the exact same timelines, but the point is that's a 1 + 1 = 2. But in the world of this film, Cary Grant, he's tending to a vineyard, and his life seems to be okay. There doesn't appear to be any reason why he would want to get involved in the jewel thievery business, but there are just a lot of different people pressuring him from different angles, and there is a scenario that he sees where a crime could be pinned on him, and because of his priors, he may go up the river for life. And, you know, in Cary Grant's entire career, he made so many movies and so many great performances, even in films which aren't as well known as Philadelphia Story or Bringing Up Baby, or, you know, working with Mae West in 1930, or the Hitchcock films such as Suspicion, with the extraordinary also Olivia de Havilland. She was the Grand Dame of Hollywood. I'm sorry, it was with Joan Fontaine, Olivia de Havilland's sister. But Olivia de Havilland lived until over 100, which was just unbelievable. But Cary Grant gave so many great performances, but he didn't play this kind of character that often, where he is, if you didn't know that he had been a jewel thief, he is presented mostly, I mean, he's framed at, you know, like a normal Cary Grant type of character, but he doesn't have that many films where his character is a gray character or morally ambiguous. He usually played guys whose hearts were in the right place. And in the world of this film, you can see there's a scenario in which one such as John Roby would be after Grace Kelly, not just because she's hot, but because she's loaded. And that's also an angle from Tequila Sunrise, where, yes, Kurt Russell thinks Michelle Pfeiffer's Joanne Volinari is gorgeous, but he's not that interested in her as a person. He uses her as a kind of vehicle, a conduit, to try to get information on his buddy, Dale McCusick, the Mel Gibson character. He's pretty sure that something's going on with that guy. So you can get bogged down in the minutia of plot. And the thing with this movie, the reason why, despite the Rotten Tomatoes score being so high, this is not considered one of Alfred Hitchcock's, it might not even be in his top 20 if we're being honest, because the atmosphere is too relaxed for a thriller. Now, you can point to segments of Rear Window, for example, which, if I'm asked the question, what do I think from a cinematic perspective? What do I believe is Alfred Hitchcock's best film? I'm supposed to say Vertigo. Because Vertigo is the one who the Sight and Sound poll routinely has it ranked as one of the top 5 greatest motion pictures ever made. Now, I can argue in favor of Vertigo, and I could explain why and put you to sleep, why Vertigo is supposed to be, from this perspective, Hitchcock's best film. But I believe that the best movie that Hitchcock ever made is Rear Window. The most entertaining film he ever made is North by Northwest. The most groundbreaking and the most important cinematically and for Hollywood is Psycho. But again, these are all subjective opinions. But Rear Window, despite having stretches where the noose is not really that tight, when things ratchet up in the third act, it is electric. And that's a movie that's now more than 70 years old. To Catch a Thief is a very entertaining film. And hey, we can say that Cary Grant and Grace Kelly have really good chemistry. I mean, they don't look like they're acting. They look like they want to get each other's clothes off. And there are other Cary Grant conventional leading man roles, we could say, like with Deborah Carr in An Affair to Remember, and certainly with Eva Marie Saint in North by Northwest, Audrey Hepburn in Charade, one of my favorite films. That might be my favorite underrated Cary Grant performance. His chemistry with Grace Kelly, though, is awesome. They don't appear to be acting, and they don't just appear to be, hey, we're looking at these great stars, having love scenes. It feels like the real thing with them. But there are these stretches of To Catch a Thief where not that much is going on and the stakes are not that high, and there's a lot of joking around, and the atmosphere is very laid back and relaxed. And I feel like the Rotten Tomato score, this is a really good movie. I would give this 3.5 stars out of 4, but it's as if this movie is almost better remembered than it should be. It's not a great film. It's a super entertaining movie about two movie stars, but it's not, aside from the very end, and I'm not going to spoil it, there's a chase sequence across the rooftops that is fantastic. But other than that, it's a very leisurely paced film. For a thriller, it's not that it's slow, it's just not that much of import happens. There are long stretches of this film where we're just sort of checking out, God, Grace looks incredible, and Jessie Royce Landis, wow, she was hot in her day too, and Cary looks awesome. Cary was 51 when this movie was shot. But there was a time in the 90s, right around the time when Gus Van Sant decided, as his follow-up to Good Will Hunting, was doing a remake of Psycho. And there was talk that The Birds was going to get remade. And if Psycho had been a hit, there was also rumors in 1997, Harrison Ford was circling a remake of To Catch a Thief, and Sandra Bullock was in talks if it was going to happen. There had been preliminary discussions for this. And I am sorry. I'm not sorry that Psycho bombed. I'm sorry that Hollywood didn't just remake To Catch a Thief, because of all the Hitchcock films, I feel like that's a movie that could have been made, maybe not better, but it could have been at least just as good, although a little bit unusual casting of Harrison Ford as a jewel thief. But, you had Entrapment with Sean Connery a couple of years later, and Ving Rhames and Catherine Zeta-Jones in a kind of early star-making role for her, after Mask of Zorro, which made her a star. But presumably because of the failure of the Psycho remake, which it's okay, but that's not a film that needed a shot-for-shot reconstruction or close to it. It wasn't necessary. Oh, before I forget, To Catch a Thief is streaming free on MGM Plus, and I know it was on Paramount Plus, just in case I would forget. But this is one of those movies that, if you love cinema, if you love cinematography, if you're a fan of costume design, of production design, you look at what Hitchcock was able to achieve 70 years ago with some of his shot making. And, Quentin Tarantino has talked about it. There are certain movies in which he felt that Hitchcock took the easy way out, that there were different kinds of shots he could have tried instead of using rear projection as he did, and some process shots. But in this film, the shots of the French Riviera are amazing. And that's why I say it's strange that this film didn't cost more, because the location work is so stunning. And you can't light movie stars any better than he lit Grace Kelly beautifully, of course, in Rear Window. And, I love James Stewart, but the pairing of Grace and James Stewart is kind of funny in Rear Window. It's not funny here. The chemistry between the two leads here is palpable, as I've said, whereas it's kind of lukewarm in Rear Window. James Stewart just looks too old for Grace Kelly, and yet they seem very age appropriate. Cary does not seem too old for Grace Kelly, even though he's just about the same amount of years older than her as James Stewart. But James Stewart just kind of, I guess he looked older than he was. He seems grandfatherly to me in Rear Window, and Grace looks like she could be a grad student at that particular, point in time. But I didn't see To Catch a Thief in film school. My first experience with it was renting it, and I mean, I liked it, but for the Hitchcock films that I had seen, it's in the second tier. Alfred didn't really miss very often until, unfortunately, later in his career. Films like Topaz and Torn Curtain, which Torn Curtain should have been a lot better. And he had Paul Newman given his best. It just isn't that good. And then Hitch did his only real R-rated kind of thriller, Frenzy, which it's pretty good. It's not up to par for Hitchcock's earlier works. And you see certain filmmakers who, even as they age, just keep knocking stuff out of the park. And it's unfortunate because from a technical perspective, there was nothing wrong with Hitchcock's craft. He just didn't have, the scripts weren't as good. And he was working on something called Short Night when he died. He wasn't that old when he passed. Sir Alfred was, what was he? Was he 82, 83? I mean, you see Francis Coppola and Scorsese, they're still working a full schedule in their 80s. I guess Alfred just didn't take that great of care of himself. The one other thing I wanted to mention, Hitchcock celebrated, I want to say it was his 59th birthday. I think Sir Alfred was born 1896. I could be wrong about that. But he was celebrating a birthday while the film was shot. And as much as I said he had reputation, he really didn't do Tippi Hedren particularly well in either The Birds or Marnie, but more so The Birds. But he didn't want to cast her in Marnie. He wanted Grace Kelly for that role. But it seems to have been a very pleasant experience for both Grace Kelly and Cary Grant to do To Catch a Thief. And there is a picture of a surprise birthday party that Cary Grant and Grace Kelly put together for the cast and crew, kind of to maybe take a load off, and we've been working such a difficult schedule. But it is a really beautiful picture, a kind of a just showing, it's a cliche to say this, old school Hollywood glamour. But it's a picture of Alfred Hitchcock holding hands with Grace Kelly and Cary Grant just off to the side with the biggest smile on his face, looking delighted at the surprise. And Sir Alfred is blowing out birthday candles as Grace Kelly also looks thrilled that they're able to celebrate this. And then you see members of the cast and crew behind them all joining in what, I don't want to say a standing ovation, but they're celebrating Alfred's birthday. And it's just one of those behind the scenes photos that you don't get enough of from that era because everything wasn't recorded. You don't have people with their phone recording or taking hundreds of pictures a day. But just to see that, a snapshot in time, because Cary Grant had actually already announced his retirement before To Catch a Thief. He wasn't sure if he wanted to keep working. He was 50. Maybe he wanted to do what he ended up doing, which was he got married and he had a daughter. And when he retired later, it was because he wanted to actually be a father and take his daughter Jennifer around the world and do stuff outside of sitting in trailers and the kind of day-to-day grind of the movie business. But the story of how Cary Grant even got To Catch a Thief is that he was in Europe and he wasn't sure if he was going to work again. And he was in a hotel and he was notified by the desk that, Mr. Grant, you have a cable. Would you come down? And it was a cable from Hitchcock saying, I have a script for you and I want to make a movie in the French Riviera. I think it could be terrific. Are you interested? And that's how Cary Grant that time ended up not retiring at age 50, ended up working for basically another decade. His last film, I believe, was Walk, Don't Run, which was really not was not befitting of his talents, and it's a supporting role. His last kind of lead role was an okay comedy called Father Goose, but his last great film would have to be Charade, the Stanley Donen film with Audrey Hepburn, Walter Matthau, Lee Marvin, George Kennedy. Just an amazing, amazing movie. But To Catch a Thief, 70 years old today, a story about a jewel thief and an heiress on the French Riviera, Monaco, Monte Carlo, but it's not really a story about a jewel thief and an heiress who is loaded. It's a story, a film about two movie stars, arguably two of the 10 greatest movie stars in the history of Hollywood. In the case of Cary, he might be number one. To Catch a Thief, released on this day, 1955, directed by Sir Alfred Hitchcock, and starring Cary Grant, Grace Kelly, Jesse Royce Landis, and in his usual cameo, Alfred Hitchcock himself. This has been episode 581 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your Tuesday evening here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.